So again, thank you for being here. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Courtney on positive discipline part two.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Ani. For those of you guys that have come to some of these sessions before, you guys will know me or recognize me. My name is Courtney. I am a therapist that has partnered with the district through North County Family Counseling Specialists to bring you guys what we call the Virtual Parent Academy. So we are doing this series of 10, if I'm not mistaken, 10, how many is it, Ani?
Nine, nine
Okay.
sections.
9 total sessions. And so we do these pretty much like bi-weekly, and we'll be doing them through May. Ani has a list, and she will be putting all that helpful stuff in the chat. Um, so that kind of brings us to just briefly, I'll give you kind of a couple housekeeping things. If you want to speak or engage or ask a question, I always just recommend you can take your mic off of mute and I'll kind of see because of the way that it's set up, I'll see that you want to say something and we'll give you some space to do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can put any questions or comments. I'll be asking for a lot of engagement throughout the presentation. And if you want to engage there, you can do it in the chat. A lot of people find that a little bit easier. I check the chat throughout, and I really love to engage with you guys throughout the presentation. So, yeah, we ask that you just keep your microphone on mute and until you're kind of ready to speak. That way, it just keeps everybody's privacy and for the continuity of the presentation. So, I think that's it. We will have an evaluation at the end where you guys can kind of give us some feedback, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to hear from us, what we could change, or how we could do better. And so we'll send that out at the end. And yeah, other than that, any questions that you have, throw them in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have pretty much like a 2-hour block where I'm just going to pack as much information in this presentation as possible. I tend to try to do that. So it might feel like a lot, this presentation, specifically because I'm going over a lot of some of the theory from positive discipline. And so in the beginning, it was kind of like an intro. If you missed that, it's okay. You'll still get a lot of good information from today. And like Ani said, she's thrown the link in the chat for you to watch the recording from last week. And we'll go ahead and jump into part two of positive discipline. For those of you that were not here last week, positive discipline is an approach or a modality to parenting. I am, like I said, a clinical therapist. I'm board certified and I've been doing this for around 15 years. I specialize in children and adolescents, particularly with emphasis on trauma and parenting. So I've been a certified positive discipline parent and teacher educator for about 10 years, and it's one of my passions. I love helping people with parenting, and I'm a parent. I have 2 girls. You'll see the pictures here. They're pretty young, so I'm in that phase of parenting. And I know that we have parents through the whole gamut of 0 to 18. So sometimes 0 to 19. So thank you so much for being here. You guys, if you're here before, you kind of know a little bit of my experience, and that's listed there on the slide. Feel free to ask any questions that you need to. I won't spend too much time talking about me because we have a lot to get to today. One thing that I like to start with when I do these presentations with parents, I really like to start with a quote and some discussion. And this just kind of like gets our brains moving, gets our brains in the gear of what we're talking about today. And I really just want to hear from you guys on how you relate to the quote, whether you like it, don't like it, what you think about it, if you want to add anything. And so the quote tonight is from Mona Delahook, and this is from her book. She says, "We falsely assume that children of a certain age have volitional control over their emotions and behaviors. That assumption is the main reason that many techniques to help kids with behavioral challenges fail, and that takes a heavy toll on relationships." So the reason that I chose this quote, because I have also been here. I do this with my own kids, and sometimes I assume that they have more control over their emotions and their behaviors than they really do. Um, and so I would love to hear from you guys what you guys think about this, whether you think it's true, whether you kind of have a hard time with that idea, what it means to you if your kids don't have as much control over their emotions and behaviors as we might think they do or want them to, because I certainly know I want my child to have more control over her emotions and behaviors. Um, Anybody at all wanna share or just kind of like make a comment or let us know any parenting wisdom that you've got? And like I said, if you don't want to speak, that's totally okay, or turn your mic on, you can throw it in the chat. Um, if not, there's no one biting yet, but I'll kind of go into why I chose this quote. I not only does positive discipline, the very foundation of positive discipline is the relationship that we have with our kids. So that's kind of where this quote, I think, is coming from, right? If we expect them to do things that are not developmentally appropriate, or that they're not biologically or physiologically capable of, we really run the risk of damaging our relationship with them, right? Because we're asking them to do something that they're not totally capable of. Now, I'm not in the parenting camp of saying that this means we just like let them run amok, right? Because they don't know how to control it and just like love them hard enough. Not at all. I think in the last class, if you guys were here, we talked a lot about different types of parenting. And if you guys remember, if you were here, I talked a lot about that axis of how much warmth you have in your parenting and how much demand there is. And in my opinion, and a lot of the research supports, when we have really high warmth and really high demand, that's the best type of parenting, right? That's authoritative parenting. And so that is kind of the foundation of what I'm going to try to teach you guys in these classes, but particularly in the positive discipline part one and part two, is that I want you to be authoritative parents, and I want you to learn how to do that, and I want you to feel comfortable doing that, and I want you to be able to understand or prioritize your relationship with your kids, because that's going to be, in my opinion, the best way to make behavior change if you need behavior change with any of your kids. Awesome. Susan says that she likes the quote. Hi, Susan, because it appreciates where they are and each kid is unique. Absolutely. So, what we're doing here is we're meeting kids where they are, right? We are knowingly, with all the information that we have, saying, look, they don't have the control, volitional control over their emotions and their behaviors yet, right? We're teaching them to do that each day, each moment, each parenting um, practice, right? That's the opportunity that we get to teach them and to meet them where they are developmentally. And so, absolutely, this is definitely implying all kids are unique. And if we don't take this stance, we run the risk of really damaging the relationship for sure. Thank you so much. I love when you guys talk to me and give me some input. Okay, so if anybody has anything else they want to say, go ahead, throw it in the chat. Go ahead and turn your mic off and say anything you want to about this. The reality is this is going to be where my foundation with positive discipline comes from. It's basically the relationship. And so all the other things can come if we have a good relationship with our kids. And so that's kind of my goal for today, the objectives for tonight. I really want you guys to learn tools, learn ways to develop the relationship, or learn to repair. Does the relationship between the parent and child need to be repaired? If so, how can I help you guys do that? I'm going to give you guys lots of strategies. One of the big ones, we focus on mistakes that we make as parents because in positive discipline, we believe that developing a healthy relationship is all about mistakes because we're all making mistakes, right? Both our kids and us. And it's incredibly important we can use those to our own um, advantage. And so anytime we make a mistake, I'm really going to kind of focus on that for a couple slides and help you guys just learn those tools, better the relationship. When our kids see us, apologizing or recognizing or acknowledging our mistakes, it really goes a long way in building that relationship or repairing that relationship. Of course, I want you guys to participate in some of the exercises to explore new skills. We're going to do a kind and firm exercise. And then I have a take-home exercise, which is a family meeting exercise where I would hope that you guys would start to implement. This is a really big thing in positive discipline. We implement family meetings weekly. And this, I'll run you through if we have enough time. I'll go through every detail of family meetings, how to run them, what to do, what they're used for. And Ani, I'm not sure if you did that already. You can give me a thumbs up. I had sent you the handout for the family meeting. If you don't have it on that computer, I can go ahead and try to figure out how to do that as well. Oh, Ani's got it already in the
Got
chat.
it.
Thank you. So helpful having her to help me out. Okay, so there's going to be an exercise where we go through family meetings and I kind of teach you guys about that, and you guys can ask questions if you have them. Um, Obviously, we're hopefully having a little bit of fun learning about the different parenting options. We focused on that a lot last week and the styles, but we'll continue talking about all that today. And I have a whole slide of scientific research to share with you guys that supports the positive discipline model so that it doesn't feel like I'm just making all this stuff up and it's not actually really helpful. So I will give you guys that. If any of you guys are a fan of the scientific research like I am, that will be on the last slide I'll share with you guys. All right. So this is part of just helping you guys get your brains flowing, do some brainstorming, learning more about our own parenting. One question that I would ask of you guys, and this will kind of give me an idea of where you guys are tonight and the people that are here, just kind of a general maybe idea of what tools do you guys feel that you have in terms of parenting, and what do you feel like you're lacking? So you could kind of give me a short and sweet answer in the chat if you'd like. You could turn your mic off and speak if you'd like to share. But I'm really just trying to gauge where you guys are at in terms of tools. What tools do you feel like you have? And what do you feel like you're lacking in parenting or in your parenting journey? And then maybe another question might be, where have you received the bulk of your parenting skills? Where do you glean that information, or where do you feel like you get that information, or just like how do you parent? Where do you get it from, right? Is it just kind of like a natural quality? If you're a parent or grandparent, co-parent, um, older sibling, right, family member, where do you feel like you get your parenting guidance? Where does it come from? So some people are saying to listen without judgment. Mary, that's awesome. That is a great tool. Sometimes I feel I lack emotional intelligence because of my upbringing. My parenting skills are from not to do what my parents did. Okay, Carl, that's definitely popular. I think a lot of us, we talked about that last time, right? Like I talk a lot with families about their family of origin, where we come from and how we were parented, because that absolutely plays a part in how we parent. And it might be that overcorrection of like, okay, I'm not doing what my parents did. I'm going to do something radically different. And sometimes that can have, it has pros and cons, right? Um, I'm not sure. Darla Van, have lots of understanding and love, lack knowing how to grow with the parenting as the kiddo grows, transitions into new situations, mostly parenting guidance from other parents. Okay. Yes, understanding and love. So high on warmth, right? We really want to be warm, compassionate parents. But I hear also maybe there's like the transition as kids get older, like how do I change my parenting? It's so funny. I can totally relate because as you guys saw in the beginning, I have a 5-year old and a 2.5-year-old of my own. And I almost feel like with my 5-year old, I kind of like, okay, I'm advancing with her. And then with my 2.5-year old, sometimes I'm like finding myself, I go pick up books and I'm like, wait a minute, I need to go back and look at my parenting skills for a 2-year old because it's so different. And, I do this for a living. And sometimes for me, right, it's still difficult. It's still hard. Susan says, I feel like I have consistency and routines. An area I feel like lacking patience, managing my own emotions in response. Oh my gosh, Susan, this one is so hard. I was just going to say that when there was kind of some crickets, I was like, okay, well, the one that I'm lacking is patience, right? Especially like just with how your day is going, how your week is going, how your month or year is going. It's like such a big deal. And it impacts us so much. Um, Okay, so we have a question. At what age should we expect them to have volitional control over their behaviors? That's a good question. I think, Charles, for every kid, it's going to be a little bit different, right? And that's pretty standard. But the reality is, what we've learned and what the research tells us is that a child's prefrontal cortex specifically, which is kind of the powerhouse of all of this really nice regulatory um, action, right? All that regulatory action kind of comes from the prefrontal cortex. And this doesn't completely develop until about 25. What they've also found I was talking about this in some previous weeks, is that they're actually finding that that number is closer to 40, right? So that might give us some insight into our own lives and our own behavior. But really, I think like to have control over their emotions and behaviors, not only is that like individual specific, because you might know like some adults who don't have control over their behaviors or their emotions. Now, I would argue that's not the norm, right? The for typical neurodevelopment or typical development, psychological development, we would look at like, okay, by the time they're around 25, they've got pretty substantial control over their behavior and emotions. And so you can use that as kind of a guide. And yes, that sounds maybe for some people, oh my gosh, that's so far away. And for some people, you might like a light bulb might click, something might click, a light bulb turns on because the reality is, our brain takes pretty long to develop, right? Especially with those really fine-tuned things like emotions, regulating behaviors, impulse control, long-term consequences, right? Reward mapping and planning. All of those things take quite a bit of time to develop in humans. And so that would be my answer is we're looking at definitely beyond childhood, early adulthood is when we can expect them to have pretty adequate control over their emotions and behaviors. Um, Now, what we also talk about in the field of psychology when we talk about children and adolescents is that the younger the kid, the more dependent they are on you and your nervous system to have that control, right? So it's almost like I've talked about this before in previous classes. They're going to borrow your nervous system, right? Which is why some of the parents that we're talking about, like, oh my gosh, like I really struggle with patience, managing my own emotions. For me as a parent, that's the hardest thing. That's the thing I'll tell you as a parenting expert, I have not figured out yet. I have not mastered that yet, I should say. I think it's because I'm a human and I'm not a robot. But the reality is, it's really, really hard to control our own emotions and behaviors. And so what we're doing is we're letting our kids borrow some of that. And so we're doing our best, right? And there's going to be times when we make mistakes and when, we're not perfect and we have to apologize or we do things or say things that we are not happy with or happy about or proud of. And so that's kind of where the conversation today will come in about mistakes and apologizing and repair and things like that, because that's what keeps that relationship really good. So, I hope that answers your question, and thank you guys for your input. If there's anybody else that wants to share, absolutely feel free to put it into the chat. Okay, so, jumping off of the conversation of last class, right? We talked a lot about like introduction to positive discipline, what are the kind of psychological foundations of this theory? And um, this is where a lot of that is kind of jumping off or pivoting from. And so tonight, I'm going to talk a lot about belonging and encouraged versus discouraged encouraged versus discouraged children. I've been sick. I don't know about you guys. There's been sickness just rampant. If you have young kids, feels like they're just sick forever. So that's kind of what's happening with my voice. I apologize. Lots of sniffling over here, but it's been about 2 months and I'm still kind of here. So, okay. So we're going to talk a lot about discouraged versus encouraged children. So what I want you guys to do is we're going to start talking about belonging being the foundation of our child's being, right? And then we're going to talk about how we help them do that, how we help them feel like they belong and they're significant. And so I'm going to kind of flip forward for just a second. Hopefully, so this blurriness clears up once it loads. This is a very nice chart. If you'd like, you can take a screenshot of it. There's also going to be in the PowerPoint. Ani shared the PDF of the PowerPoint that I created, and you can pull that up. Might be a little bit more clearer on the PDF. But essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to start on this very left side of the screen where it says about belonging. And what that says is, hopefully you guys can read it, but I'm going to read it out for you. The basis and foundation of positive discipline is that a human being's basic desire is to feel belonging and significance. So this is kind of what's motivating this idea of doing positive discipline with our kids and using this as a parenting model. When we feel encouraged, belonging occurs in ways that are socially useful. When we feel discouraged, finding belonging and significance in useful ways, we seek mistaken or socially useless ways. And so this highlights on both sides, there's going to be the kind of both paths, right? The person who believes that they're socially useful or they're encouraged on the left side, and on the right side, a person who is discouraged or is taking these like mistaken approaches to belonging. Okay. And so, how this is going to be helpful for you, because this gets a little bit complex, especially because we don't have as much time as I would like to go into something like this. Really, the way that I want you to use this is on the right side where the blue text is. you'll see at the top where it says mistaken approaches to belonging looks like. Find perhaps the behavior that you see in your kids, and that will be the row that you focus on. So if you have a kid who maybe is very defiant, makes a lot of demands, they rebel, they tantrum, you might be in that second row where it talks about power, right? And so you might start focusing on, okay, they believe the next block that I count or I belong only if I'm the boss, right? So there's this like, you can't make me, you can't stop me mentality. Others, in response to their behavior, feel defeated, they feel angry, right? And this is probably us as parents. We might feel provoked, threatened, or challenged. And so, what we do, right, we react to their mistaken belief and we force, we coerce, we argue, we punish, we fight. And that's not going to work because we're responding to the mistaken belief, right? And any of those behaviors that we take, if we try to force a kid who's defiant, right? What usually happens when we try to force a kid into something who's really defiant? Usually we're getting into a power struggle, right? And we're battling, right? And usually it doesn't work. So arguably what we would do, right, is we're going to try to help them feel empowered. We're going to try to help them feel, if you go all the way to the left, right, on that left side where the green text is of that same row, we're going to try to help them believe I do have freedom within limits, right? I do have the freedom to choose and act. I can contribute. I'm empowered, right? That sounds so different and looks so different. So those kids, they make socially useful choices. They cooperate. They share responsibility, right? Because they feel empowered. And that is achieved through having choices, right? Making agreements together. This is why I talk a lot about collaborative parenting, creating opportunities to contribute for your kids, teaching and training. I talk a lot about this too. Mutual respect, asking them versus telling them, right? Um, what we're going to do is we're going to withdraw from provocations. We're not going to fight, but we're not going to give in, right? We're going to problem solve with them. We're going to give them choices, separate the deed from the doer, focus on solutions, right? So this is going to be hopefully how this chart becomes helpful for you. Hopefully, some people look at it and it's like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Sometimes I look at it and think that, but really just focus maybe on that, like, what's the problem behavior I see? Some people can really grasp it if they do it that way. And then we can kind of like expand in that row, maybe just focus on one row. So, with that being said, what we're trying to do is get kids from a place of being disconnected, disempowered, disrespected, discouraged to connected, empowered, respected, encouraged, right? And so like how do we do that, right? And there's going to be some really good information in those rows, as I said, the achieved through column specifically and the encouraging responses at the very end, those two gray boxes. But another way that we do that, right, is this how that I'm going to get into in these next two slides. Um, what I'm going to say is I'm going to kind of summarize that whole conversation by saying misbehaving children are often discouraged children. They have mistaken ideas on how to achieve their primary goal, which is to belong, right? So their mistaken ideas lead them to misbehavior. That's what we believe in this positive discipline arena. We cannot be effective as parents or as behavioral changers or teachers, coaches until we address those beliefs rather than just the behavior. And so this is why I think a lot of parenting methods, this is where I think they fall short because they're not addressing those beliefs, they're just addressing behavior, right? So, if you find yourself in this predicament and you find yourself like with some of these maybe behaviors, problem behaviors that your kids have, but nothing really seems to work, this is a perfect place for you to be tonight. So we'll really kind of help you understand with that chart, okay, what's the belief, right? What does my child believe and how do I help change that, right? And relationship, in my opinion, is how we start. That's the how of this belonging. Okay. So the next point is that we're going to use encouragement to help them feel belonging, right? So that motivation for misbehavior is eliminated. When kids belong, they do socially useful behaviors. So, one of the ways that we do that is we celebrate successes rather than focusing on their mistakes. Okay. So, this might look like all the things in your kid's week that they've done wrong. Try to focus on what they did right. Now, we don't do this all the time, right? Because there's a time and a place for addressing the mistake or the negative behavior or the problem behavior or whatever we want to call it. But what we really want to try to focus on with our parenting voice and with our parenting, with our discipline, right? With our teaching is we're going to celebrate successes and we're going to really try to highlight those. This helps kids feel more encouraged, right? You can think, for example, like a job that you've had where those people, your boss or the administrative team did not focus on all the good things that you did. Maybe they just kind of focused on some of the bad things. There's one or two things that you did where they just really kind of hyper focused on those. And then what happened to your attitude, right? What happened to your motivation? What happened to your willingness to do extra or go further, right? Really what happens is the same that happens to our kids. We start to feel discouraged and when people focus on our mistakes and highlight those, and really that kind of like simple fix in the behavior change realm can be huge, right? So another way to help kids feel encouraged, right? We're going to kind of try to focus more on successes, more on the positive things that they do, right? We talk a lot about in the behavior world, positive reinforcement is more effective when we talk about behavior change than negative reinforcement, which means noticing the positive. Your kid does something, they clean their room, right? Oh my gosh, like we're really going to hammer in on you cleaned your room, like you did a great job, you really did it. What made you, how could you do, how did you do this? Thanks so much for doing these things, right? We're positively reinforcing them. A great way to help kids feel encouraged is to spend time being with them, right? So I know for a lot of parents, they're like, I'm busy, I don't have a ton of time, I work, or, we've got a lot going on, life is really stressful. I always talk to parents about spending intentional, scheduled, undistracted one-on-one time with our kids, right? Because this is how we do the belonging. This is how we help them feel encouraged and like they belong, right? And of course, that is the how, right? The how in building the relationship is spending time with them, quality time with them. We talked a little bit about this last time, and that was some of the skills and tips like be a piece of furniture in the room, right? If some of you guys were not here, really what I say is some parents are like, well, my kids don't want to talk to me or they don't want to have anything to do with me. Just be a piece of furniture in the room, right? Now that looks like, maybe they want to play games and you're just going to sit with them. There's no pressure to talk, there's no lecturing, there's no goal in that conversation. It's just sitting with them, right? Now, if you don't have that problem and you do feel like you have a little bit of a better relationship, it might be like hey, I want to spend the next hour with you, or I want to spend the next 30 minutes with you. What could we do? We could go on a walk, we could play a board game, we could color, we could, watch a movie together, we could go to the library or go to the bookstore, we could, go to the park. Whatever that looks like. And if your kid's like, well, I don't know, it's like, okay, well, do you want to do this or that? Maybe give them two options of things. You want to go get ice cream or do you want to go for a walk in the park or a walk in the neighborhood or whatever that looks like? Just spending good quality time with them. Um, Another really good way to integrate, right, this building of the relationship and the belonging is we do the cherry in the pit at my house. And that is kind of like the best and worst, sharing those things during family meals or another routine activity, whether it's bedtime or wake up from the day before. Just sharing about your day. Sharing meals is a really big one that I think I personally and professionally try to encourage parents to do. If you don't do family meals where everyone's eating together, maybe if, I'm not going to pretend that I could fix all of your schedules or, have some sort of advice that would be good for everyone. So you might have to generalize, but like maybe try if you're not doing any family dinners at all during the week, try shoot for 2 nights a week where everyone eats together and you guys spend time undistracted without phones, where you guys talk about each other's day or do the cherry in the pit or tell funny jokes or play a trivia game while you're eating, something that gets you guys talking and getting closer as a family. But really, I kind of foot stomp family meals each night, however the schedule will work for your family. But I think it's really important time where the family gets to come together from being separated all day, everyone doing their own thing, to really kind of coming together and getting that sense of belonging. We're going to talk about family meetings, but using these weekly to solve problems with that mutual respect and collaboration or cooperation. Um, Positive discipline is really big on family meetings. So it's one of the things that's kind of standard for most families that kind of engage with positive discipline. We do them in my family. They look a little bit different because my kids are really young. So mostly it's just kind of like some silly family time where we might brainstorm if we do get to take a vacation that year or we do get to go see family. We're kind of talking about some things like that. But kind of sitting for any extended period of time with a 2.5-year-old is not um, super wise or productive, but we do the routine anyway so that when our kids are older, it will still feel like the norm to do those things. But I'll get into in the next part of our presentation, kind of the second half of the presentation, I'll tell you guys all about how to do family meetings, and you'll have a handout, and so you should be a pro by the end of today's session. Okay. Um, One of the ways that we help kids feel belonging, the how of doing this as a family, is we give children meaningful jobs. Kids feel belonging when they know they make real contribution. And so this is one of the things that I start with when I start with families in therapy. And this is, what are the expectation and roles of the children in the house and the parents in the house? And my instructions generally are, do this with your kids. You collaborate with your kids depending on how old they are and where they're at developmentally. But we're going to collaborate with our kids on, okay, here's my job and here are my roles and expectations for the week. And you might even ask, what do you need from me, kids? Right? And each kid might say something different. And we're going to kind of write all that down in our family meeting and problem solve on how to make that happen. And then we're going to tell our kids, okay, what's your role and what are your expectations through the week, right? Because I meet a lot of families who don't have, and this might be the way that your family is, and it might not be. I meet a lot of families who don't have their expectations laid out for the family, meaning there's no like general structure in the family contributions or what some people call chores. Like it's just kind of willy-nilly. There's no really rhyme or reason to it. I expect them to do that on one day and then on the next day I do it or right. So I meet a lot of families where there's not this kind of like baseline for helping kids understand what's expected of them. And I would argue that without having that conversation, um, we put our kids at a detriment, right? Because what we need to do is be very clear about what their role is and what their expectations are and what our role is and our expectations are. I think once we do that and we kind of get a gauge of like, okay, Here's what we need from the household. We need somebody who takes out the trash each week on Thursdays, or we need someone who is going to clean the dishes each night and someone's who's going to put them away. We need somebody every week who's going to clean up dog poop, right? Like whatever your household needs, you're going to lay all that out and then you're going to say who wants to do what, right? Like and you might take, okay, I really want to do the laundry because that's the easiest, right? And you'll take that into account and if you can do that in a really diplomatic way, that's obviously ideal. Now, you might have kids who are like, well, I don't want to do any of it. And it's like, okay, well, we all contribute, right? We all have to contribute. Mom and dad or whoever, parents contribute, grandparents contribute in this way, providing stable housing and food and a way to school, right? Safety. And so we provide these things and contribute in this way, right? Cleaning, cooking, whatever. So you contribute in this way, right? Which is going to school, getting your grades, C and above, or whatever that looks like for your family. And then what are some of the contributions like doing their own laundry, cleaning their own room, helping with the dishes or with the kitchen, helping with the trash. And so really laying all of that out is super helpful because then in positive discipline, we also have this language of, hey, you collaborated with me on that and you agreed to do the trash every Thursday. And so here we are on Thursday. Let's get it done, right? It's a lot easier than like dictating or telling someone to do something if they already agreed on it, right? So this is kind of the general idea. So we've already hit both of those points. Give them meaningful jobs. All kids from the time they're toddlers all the way up through adulthood should have meaningful jobs within the house. Developmentally, those are going to look a little bit different, right? 2-year-olds, they might be pouring cereal or they might pour milk in the morning or they might clean up a water mess on the ground or they might take their clothes off at bedtime and put them in the laundry or like in the hamper. So they might have different watering a plant or something small, right? But they still have meaningful jobs because all kids from the time they're very young want to contribute. So we decide together on the jobs to be done. We collaborate. If you're having problems, right, with that, the family meetings are going to be helpful because you will kind of go through how to navigate when kids are not wanting to do things or they refuse. Okay, so one of the other things that I talked to you guys about was training, right? Our kids feel more socially useful and encouraged if we take time to train them, right? And so I talked to so many families about the meaning of clean, right? And I kind of put it in quotes. Clean, and that definition varies depending on what person you ask. And this could also be said, so maybe me versus Ani, right? We have different opinions or definitions of clean. And that's not a bad thing. It's a individual thing. And so what we want to do is when we tell our kids, and I hear this all the time from parents, it's probably one of the biggest like complaints that I hear is I tell them to clean their room and they just don't do it. And I'm like, okay, we got to break this all the way down. What does clean mean to you? And what does clean mean to your child? How old is your child? What's their, temperament and personality? Maybe a little, genetic influence. Um, what does clean mean to them versus what does clean mean to you? And so what I tell parents is be very clear about what clean means. When you go into the room, you're going to tell them, okay, what I mean by clean is the clothes are all in the hamper, all of your stuffed animals are in their bin, all of your Legos, excuse me, are in the box. Your bed is made and the floor is clear of anything, right? So like really lay it out what clean means to you. Ask what their understanding is. You're going to show them what it looks like, right? And so with my younger kids, I'll kind of walk them through cleaning their room, right? And I do this typically with them as they get older. Like my 5-year-old now is a little bit more independent, where I can say she gets overwhelmed, right? They go into a room that's totally messy, and I'm like, okay, clean the room. So what I do is I start small. Okay, put all she'll come out. Oh, it's so much. It's so messy. I'm like, okay, you made the mess, right? part of playing is a mess. So first, get started with your stuffed animals and then I can come help, right? So she goes in and she'll kind of do that. And by the time I come in, usually there's more than just the stuffed animals done. But then it's like, okay, now let's get all the books and we'll put all the books the way they go in the bookshelf, right? And so for younger kids, you're walking them through this more, right? And I'm hand walking her through these tasks and I'm rinsing and repeating, right? And so I'm at the point where she's 5. I'm not really expecting her to completely clean her room from top to bottom by herself. I'm usually in some way supervising, kind of talking her through it. I'm doing my own dishes or cleaning my, the rest of the house, and I'm saying, "Oh, okay, I pop in. It looks like all the books need to be, stacked up and put in the bookshelf." And then I kind of can walk away. Now, some kids, right, when you're first doing this, you can't walk away because they're getting disoriented as soon as you leave, right? So it's like a, hey, clean your room. And then you walk away and nothing has been done, right? And part of that is because it takes a lot of time getting them hand walked through this to then be able to do it independently. But a lot of the time, they just need that initial supervision, right? So oftentimes, too, if it's like a tough task, I'll stay in the beginning and I'm saying, like, okay, let's get started. And I'm going to watch them get started and I'm going to watch her start to do it and then I might be able to walk away, right? And like move on. Now with older kids, obviously this is going to change, right? They're if you've trained them, then this will change and you're going to do less supervision or less hand walking. But if you have teenagers who we've never done this with, then you kind of have to start from scratch, right? And kind of like, okay, you're going to say it a little different. It's going to look a little different because they're older. But my opinion is the same. You still are going to have to teach them, train them, show them, and then kind of, watch that they know how to do it. So we always teach and model mutual respect. And this is the big part of belonging and significance in the relationship. And this is the kind and firm technique, which I will show you guys in the second half of the presentation. One of my favorites, just really briefly to show you what this is, right? It's a sandwich statement. It's the kind statement, and then it's the limit, right? Or the firm statement. So you might say something like, with my kids, um, they're upset about something, and maybe it's like a TV show that they want to watch. I might say, like, okay, I love you, and we agreed that we only were going to watch one. And so then conversation over, right? I love you and it's time for bed, right? I love seeing you giggle and get excited. And it's bedtime. We're gonna, lose access to our bedtime routine or lose one of our stories for the evening or whatever that limit is. But we're sandwiching, right? Something kind, that warmth, and then that demand or that limit. We're going to teach children really well, really thoroughly about mistakes, and I'm going to get into that in the second half as well. We're teaching ourselves about mistakes and how to use those, and then we're going to teach our kids. Proper timing, I talk about this a lot, right? Like, um, part of the relationship build is knowing when to use our parenting, uh, just when to be a parent, right? When to like, not when to be a parent, but when to initiate um, the limit or when to initiate the discussion or when to initiate um, the boundary, right? We want to have proper timing. If our kid is like really emotionally exhausted from school all day, and then it's like they come home and we're going to try to talk to them about how, they've been late every morning, or it's like maybe we focus on the timing. Maybe we wait until, they've had a full night's rest and they're fully fed in the morning and we're kind of calm and chill, right? We're not like on the way to school late already and then we're kind of talking about how we're late, right? So I think there's a proper timing, and you as a parent using your best judgment and your gut instinct, hopefully can gauge, okay, wait a minute, this typically doesn't go well when I talk to my kid about XYZ when they're like this, right? You kind of know your child, and I think getting the proper timing down actually makes a big difference. Um, and how much they'll hear us, right? Um, So one of the next things is focusing on solutions, right, rather than consequences. And this is the 4R method, and I have a whole slide on this in the second half as well. But I talked about this before, right? We're going to focus more on okay, I'm noticing that we're late to school every morning. Okay, instead of, saying you're losing all access to, being with your friends, right? Instead of the consequence, let's focus on solutions in our family meeting. Tomorrow in our family meeting, we're going to sit and talk about what are the solutions to getting to school on time. Okay, we're noticing this one's not ready, or this one's going back in for things, or this one's like always forgetting their lunch, so we have to turn around and go get it. Okay, what are some solutions, right? Okay, well, maybe we put out all of our clothes the night before. Maybe we're going to bed an hour early. Maybe we're right. And you focus on all those solutions and we're trying them, right? And we're trying to teach our kids too, rather than being punitive, we're going to try to help you brainstorm on how to fix this problem, right? And that's what we want them ultimately to do when they're older and when they're more independent. And so doing this, modeling this, and focusing on that when they're kids absolutely helps the relationship. Again, this doesn't mean that we don't apply consequences. It means that we're going to, when we can, focus on solutions. There will still be consequences for behavior, and we'll kind of get into that. Most the most helpful consequences are natural consequences, and I can kind of get into what those are. Um, in every relational interaction, make sure that the message of love and respect gets through. Whether you're having to be really firm because your kid has done the same thing this many times, whatever we're doing, whether it's a teaching moment, whether they made a big mistake, we want to make sure that the message of love and respect still gets through with our conversation or with that interaction. Because when we run the risk of being an authoritarian parent when we don't have that love and respect in the relationship. One thing that I do with my kids a lot is whisper or sing, particularly get down on their level, right? Because we want to try to use fun, humor, sing, be silly. Sometimes when my kids are really not listening, I whisper because it really gets their attention. I don't yell. Maybe I don't know what that says about me, but I don't yell with my kids. Now, I won't say I've never yelled, but I make it a point to not generally yell, because I don't think that the message gets through when I'm yelling. And I also just don't like to be yelled at, and I don't want to be yelled around. So it's just a personal thing that I've tried to do. I'm also a therapist, so maybe that has a really big thing, big impact on how I speak or talk. But the reality is, when I whisper, my kids don't know what to do with themselves. They're like, "What is going on?" And then they're really trying to hear me, right? So some of these things really work. And if they're used to you yelling and you start whispering and getting down on their level, things might change really quick because they're like, what is happening, right? This is so strange. This is novel and new and weird. But when you can have fun, use humor, sing, be silly, these things can be really helpful tools for us as parents. Okay, so we've got our chart. I went through a lot of this already. What I was saying is really, if you want an easy way to get through this chart, look for the problem behavior and focus on that row. I could do a whole class just on this chart. Okay, so remember I told you in the second half of the presentation, I was going to focus on this slide. We're going to be focusing on mistakes. Couple of slides, then we're going to focus on the kind and firm exercise and the family meetings. So, if anyone has questions of what we've covered so far, any questions about those couple of slides with the sense of belonging, or Darla Van says, yes, that's us. When I ask for help, my kid says, nah, I'm good. She says, I'm here for your tips. Mary says, I need to definitely work on whispering. I'm telling you guys, sometimes you might be surprised if you go in, you're normally a yeller. Obviously you have to do it when your kids are in the room, right? They can see you or hear you and like, what is going on? Just try it, see what happens. They might surprise you. Um, See, when I hear like a kid, first of all, I'd be like, how old is the kid? They're probably a teenager, but I don't know. Maybe it could be middle school. But yeah, of course. What I would do if I have a kid who, because you're asking for help, hey, can you help me? And they say, no, I'm good. I would say, I would probably kind of be a little cheeky and say, oh, well, I'm not. I really need your help. So, come contribute, right? I'd probably word it something like that. And I wouldn't really give them an option to say, no, I'm good. Now, what might have happened is you might have just gotten so tired of asking that you just kind of do it yourself. And so then they kind of know, right? Oh, well, I don't have to do it because mom's going to eventually do it. Um, and so that becomes like the norm. But what I would probably go into there is I would probably start with a family meeting and say, hey, stuff's going to change. I ask you guys for help and you don't help. I'm kind of over that, you know? I went to this class and I'm learning how to do this thing differently. And I want to know who's going to help me start doing this, and this, right? And so you might like broach the subject in that way. And you might say, like, I'm not going to let you guys say, nah, I'm good anymore, right? Um, and then you might say, okay, they still aren't going to help. Then I would say, okay, then they have to earn everything. They have to, we're stripping it all down to the basics and they have to earn everything. They have to earn time on their phone. They have to earn money. They have to earn like cool clothes or shoes or like whatever they're interested in, they're earning it, right? And they earn it by contributing. So I would kind of spin that on its head. And if you're still getting like a no, I'm good, I would be like, let's see how, like, let it ride and see how long that lasts. Because eventually kids, like, first of all, kids want to be included. And at the same time, they want those things, right? They want all the comforts and they want the good things. They want treats or, however old your kids are. Um, Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Everybody having a part. Yes, mom is not a slave, right? And sometimes that happens where like moms shoulder a lot of that, right? And it's like, okay, path of least resistance, and we talked a little bit about this in the last class. That's one of kind of the parenting pitfalls is we're just like, okay, I'm just going to do it all because it's not going to get done if I don't, and it's too much to argue, right? Um, and so, yeah, I think you can use some humor, and it sounds like you guys are moving in the right direction. And absolutely, I think having them recognize that, like, them contributing will eventually make them feel good, even though right now it's maybe initially going to feel really, really hard. Um, they're going to feel like they belong and like they're a part of the team, right? And that's pretty priceless for our kids. So I'm excited. Thank you guys so much for your feedback and your tips and what's going on with you guys. Um, okay, so we'll kind of jump into this second half of the presentation. Like I said, I love questions. I like talking with you guys about your own personal situations and giving you guys strategies and tips for things that you're currently dealing with. So if you need any of that, put it in the chat. Um, I like to, as a part of this positive discipline conversation, I really like to help parents. I like to focus on mistakes. And the reason that I like to do that is because we're talking a lot about our kids' mistaken beliefs and mistakes that our kids make and how that turns up as misbehavior. But what I really want to do is focus on how us as parents make mistakes and like what we can do with that. How we can use those to our advantage or how we can use those to um just like get a better relationship with our kids and have things be more real and more transparent because I think kids really, really respond to that. Um, and so that's why the conversation is going to shift a little bit today into, or right now, into the mistakes. And so I make mistakes pretty regularly, I think, as a parent. I would say, like, I start counting them on two hands by the end of the month. And this is something that I've really focused on because I think I recognize that all parents make mistakes, all people make mistakes, and because I've realized how hard parenting is, like being a parent of two kids under 5, I've really started to realize how hard parenting is. And so I'm like, okay, I need to give myself grace as a parent, and I make a lot of mistakes. So, being super transparent with you guys, I believe that the mistakes are part of our learning, and it's for both us and our kids. And so, in positive discipline, there's this concept of the 4 R's, right? What do we do when we make a mistake? Um, First, when we make a mistake as a parent, and that could look like, I don't know, what's the most recent mistake that I made? Um, Probably just like losing my temper, I think, with my kids. And I do that, unfortunately, more regularly now, because I own my own business and, both my partner and I work, and we're trying to be parents and we homeschool our kids. So I make a lot of mistakes. And one of those, I think, for me is my temper. And so, for example, right, I'm going to first recognize that I make the mistake. And usually this happens once I calm down, right? Once I've kind of, okay, I'm a little bit more clear-headed. One of the parents mentioned not being able to manage their own emotions and feel calm in situations. This is one of mine, right? So after the fact, I recognize that I make a mistake, right? Instead of feeling really guilty and letting that go into a place of guilt and shame, I essentially feel that embarrassment. I have some affirmations that I tell myself. I can share some of those with you guys, if you guys are interested. One of mine, the most common, is I'm a parent just figuring this out. And so I allow myself to feel the embarrassment of making the mistake, and then I let it go, right? I don't hold on to that embarrassment. I don't let it turn into guilt and shame and spiral, right? And tell myself what a terrible parent I am. And like my kids are going to be so traumatized because I just lost my temper and like raised my voice or, got snappy with them. Usually that's what it looks like with me. I'm not usually yelling, but I am kind of getting maybe sassy if we want to use that terminology. But I feel that and then I let it go. Okay. I take responsibility for my mistake without blame, shame, maybe just a little bit of appropriate guilt, right? Of like, okay, I shouldn't have done that. I know I shouldn't have done that or said that. I'm really trying to work on not being, sassy with my kids, or snippy or short. So I've recognized it. I'm taking responsibility that like, okay, maybe I didn't sleep well last night. This is me doing this thing. And I'm going to reconcile, right? The third R is I'm going to reconcile with my kids, or I'm going to, what I also repair, right? I'm going to go apologize. So I tell my kids, oh my gosh, I was so short with you just now, or I realized that came out really rude and I'm really sorry. Um, I really want to change that about myself and I'm sorry that I did that, right? Kids are so forgiving, especially when others are willing to apologize. And you might find that you hear this, right? The universal response is generally like, that's okay, mom, or that's okay, dad. Um, and so then the fourth R is we resolve by focusing on solutions. So I might say, like, okay, maybe instead I can go take a deep breath when I'm feeling really overwhelmed or like I'm going to lose my temper instead of snapping at you guys. Or maybe I'll take a pause and go outside and take 5 really deep breaths. right? Or maybe I'll go outside and take my shoes off and put my feet in the dirt or whatever that looks like, right? I'm recognizing it, I'm taking responsibility, I'm repairing with my kids, and then I'm resolving based on solutions. And so what I would suggest is you take this method, right, of building and repairing the relationship. You really learn how to do this transparently with your kids. And maybe you post it, right? So that your kids are seeing it. They're actually watching you model it. And then they're also we're going to teach them how to do it, right? Okay, you made a mistake. You didn't do XYZ, or you did the problem behavior, right? Okay, you made a mistake. Now you're going to feel that and let it go. You take responsibility. We're not going to blame. We're not going to guilt. We're not going to shame. And we might apologize, right? Who do we need to apologize to? Do we need to apologize to the teacher or to our classmate or to our parent or our sibling? And then what do we do instead, right? We resolve to change it. And so we teach our kids how to do this. And essentially, this is the way that we're really using this to repair and prioritize the relationship. We had a comment from a parent, 15 and 16-year-old boys, very young, took them out on dates one-on-one, get to know who they are, both autistic level 1 and level 3. Okay, yeah. So it sounds like lots of like really intentional time with each of them to get to know them, right? And learn who your kids are. Really enjoy undistracted time with them. I think it really, really has the ability to transform parent-child relationships, um, especially if that respect and love is getting through, right? I talk to a lot of parents who, when I talk to them about their own families, like I often ask, like, what do you wish that your parents did for you the most, right? What did you miss the most from your parents in your childhood? And overwhelmingly, the response is that I wish that they showed that they loved me more, right? I wish they were warmer. I wish that they spent more time with me. And by and large, this is shown in the data as well, right? Our kids want us in their experience because they're upset. They want to go sleep over at their friends on the weekend, and yet our answer is no. And we want to obviously model the love and the respect, right? Getting through, but we're going to set the boundary or the limit and we're not going to let that go, right? So it's I love you, and the answer is no. Um, I know you really want to do this, right? I know I can see that you're really upset. And we agreed that we had 1 hour for video games, right? So we're sandwiching the validation of their feelings with whatever rule it is. When you start this, it might feel a little bit disingenuous, or like your kids might be able to spot it and be like, what are you doing? Who did you talk to? Why are you talking like that? Because they might be like completely unused to it. And the reality is, use it anyway. Make this a part of your vocabulary. I use this with my spouse. Not in this way because there's not necessarily a rule, but it might be I'm sandwiching validation with my opinion, or validation with, what we've already decided, or validation with, the more logical thing, or right. I use this a lot. We're kind of sandwiching the validation with whatever the reality is, right? And that's because if we just say the thing on the end, right, just the limit, the boundary, the rule, we're not necessarily gonna get as good of a response because our kids don't feel validated in those moments, right? Once someone feels validated, they feel respected, right? They feel like they belong, like someone gets it, they love them, they respect them. We get easier movement, right? We don't get as much resistance. And so that's why this kind and firm is so important. Now there's quite a few other examples that I listed here. I know that you don't want to stop playing, and it's time for dinner. I know that you'd rather watch TV than do your homework. And we agreed that homework has to be done first. Like, I can see that you don't want to brush your teeth, and we'll do it together. Do you want to hop or skip to the bathroom? Right? I can tell that you don't want to mow the lawn. And that was our agreement, right? And you might kind of wait kindly and quietly for the answer. And of course, a lot of this assumes that you're going to make those agreements first. That's why I was kind of talking about having that baseline agreement collaboration with your kids. Because then we go back to that, right? I can tell you really don't want to go to bed. You really wish you could stay up, and it's bedtime. Do you want one story or two stories as soon as your jammies are on? Or do you want to read the book about the house or the book about the pancakes, right? Um, and using this one a lot, obviously, with younger kids. And I've also gotten to the habit with my kids, like, um, they really value story time, right? So it's like hey, if we dilly-dally, then we lose some of our story time, right? Do you want one story or do you want three stories? So then it's kind of like let's move this along, right? Like let's move bedtime routine along. And that's super effective because again, we're giving them a choice. We're reminding them what happens when they don't comply and when they don't, do these things. Obviously, that works great with younger kids. I can see that you want to keep playing video games, and the time that we agreed on is up. You can turn it off by yourself, or I can do it for you, right? And I use this one a lot. You can do it by yourself, or I can do it for you. More so with younger kids, right? Um, but you might even be able to use that with teenagers, with older kids. You can turn your phone off by yourself, or I can do it for you, right? Because we're giving them. I can see that you really want to keep playing it. I know how much you love this video game, and your time is up. We're giving them the choice, we're validating them, we're giving them the choice, and then we're following through on our own part if it's required. So I really want to hear from you guys. What are some examples that you guys might use? Oh, Mary says, I care about you, and I will wait until we can speak respectfully. Absolutely. That's a great one. Oftentimes, too, I say, like, I love you, and I love you too much to let us talk to each other this way. Let's see. So, someone's asking a question. A teenager won't answer the word hi to a retired neighbor when they say hi first. Outside, they're riding bikes. The retired neighbor says he has problems, no respect. Teenagers find in school, no issues. I feel like the retired neighbor with no kids is just so wrapped up with old-fashioned manners. I told her everybody's different. Anything wrong with teenagers not saying hi? Um, well, I would like start by saying like, why does your teenager not want to say hi back? Like, I would start there and I would just ask, like, hey, the neighbors kind of mentioned that they say hi to you and you don't say hi back. Like, what's that about? And you might just ask them. I don't think that it is like indicative that the child has these major issues. I would say that like what we're talking about is just kind of like maybe expected like social norms or like expected social behaviors, right? And I might say like to your kid, like, what's that about? Like, and they might say, well, I don't feel comfortable, like they're a stranger, or I don't know, the person kind of scares me, or I don't know. That's where I would go. Why doesn't, your teen want to say hi back? At this point, is it like a power thing? Like, okay, she wants me to say hi and she's pushing and she says things, so it's like I'm really not going to say hi, I would just say, what is that about? And I would ask. Um, Maybe your teen feels like there's not mutual respect, right? Like maybe that person, they feel like they're not respected by that person. Um, like I said, I don't think it's indicative of some like major issue or anything, but I do think that um, it might just go back to, like I said, kind of social behavior that's like especially if they're neighbors. I don't know, if the person is having such a hard time with them not saying hi, maybe they're not super pleasant to engage with, and maybe that's why he doesn't want to say hi. Um, I would explore if I were you, and not so much worry about whether it's an issue, like he does fine. Is he respectful in other arenas? I don't know. Like he says she's annoying. And then it might be like, yeah, is she annoying because she says hi, or is she annoying because she like expects something? Does she expect him to sit and have a conversation with her? Or you know what I mean? Yeah, it might be a conversation about that. Yeah. Yeah, he might be like, I just want to ride my bike. And then I would say, just say hi and then leave it at that. Like you don't have to sit and talk to her. It's just like or like wave or something. I wonder like if that's acceptable, right? Like a nod, a smile, a wave. Hey, and then you keep going, right? But if it's more because he doesn't want to get trapped into this like social interaction with her, I can understand that. I'd probably just teach him how to, hey, there's going to be some people that you don't necessarily want to talk to. Um, what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be like, hey, and then just keep going, which is fine, you might add, right? He doesn't have to sit and have a conversation with her. Um, and arguably, he doesn't actually have to say hi back to her. However, I do think it's like this reciprocal, like, she's a neighbor. It's not like some random person he's never going to see again. Who knows? The old lady gets mad. Some kids laugh at dogs barking. Her dogs. She's offended. Hmm. It sounds like kind of maybe it's a her issue. Um, yeah. Yep, they're teenagers. Okay, that's what I would say. Hopefully that's helpful. Anybody have any good, kind, and firm statements that you can use for this week? Any sort of problem behavior or thing that you could kind of put on repeat to tell your kids? You could screenshot this and use this as to set up your examples or to do the practice at home, or just use these phrases. I tried to use things that maybe were like relatable, or I will talk to you guys about social media and technology in one of the next presentations, and so that's a big one. Okay, so let's see, we might have you have to help do your laundry to be ready to live in your college dorm. I would say something like, because that's not necessarily kind and firm. That is, I think that's still gentle and like true. And yet I would sandwich it some way like, hey, I'm really excited for you to go to college. And we agreed that you would help do your laundry so that you can be ready, right? Like, I might kind of word it that way. So we're going to kind of jump in. Oh, let's see. Maybe Ani's got the sessions laid out for what we're going to do for the remainder of the Virtual Parent Academy. She put that in the chat. So for the next like 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to spend the remainder of the meeting really focusing on family meetings and how to do these. I will say there's the attachment in the chat if you because I am going to pull that up separately. It's a two-page document, and what this is family meetings are used to problem solve family issues in a collaborative way. Family meetings are kind of hallmark for positive discipline. We do not use family meetings for punishment, for negative discussions, to be punitive in any way, to highlight what someone is doing in a really negative way. I know a lot of families that I've met who I have not coached yet or done therapy with for positive discipline. They use family meetings and they just kind of use that term, right? Oh, we're having a family meeting because maybe something really, a crisis happened. But we don't want to use family meetings in that way. Let's see. Repost the slide. Darla, which slide do you need? Oh, okay. So there's the PDF of the slideshow. Okay, so family meetings are generally used for problem solving as a family, not for punishment or for negative discussion. So what we do is we schedule family meetings weekly and we prioritize them as if they were an appointment, right? We don't like, because some families been kind of get into the habit of like pushing them off or like, oh, we don't have time or oh, the week's too crazy. We really want to prioritize them. And this might be your own, especially depending on the age of your kids or how many kids you have. These might only be 15 minutes long, right? They're not designed to be super long and drawn out and for everyone to like really despise doing them and you know think about them with disdain. We really want them to have structure and everybody feels supported so that they can contribute. And it always ends with fun, right? So you might play a game, you might do trivia, you might watch funny videos, like whatever is right for your family. You want to kind of close this with something fun. So the reality of these is that we want to do them every week. We don't want to cancel. We want to kind of keep doing them consistently. Can everybody see the family meetings handout? Ani, is that visible to you?
No, we still see the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. Hopefully that's better now. Okay, so you have this as a link in the chat, but we're going to go over how to do how to have an effective family meeting. So what we do initially is we're going to introduce the family meeting. Okay, everybody, we're going to have our first family meeting. We're going to read through the steps and practice each one until we all know them well enough to have family meetings without reading them. You might have to talk to your family and say, look, we're going to start having family meetings every week. They're going to be about 30 minutes long to start, right? This is how we're going to do them. This is why we're going to use them to problem solve. We're going to use them a little bit of fun at the end of the night. But you want to introduce that to your family, right? Especially if you guys are not used to doing something like structured like this. There's always a talking stick. It can be any item. It can be a microphone that you guys have. I've had families use like batons or pens or little statues that they have in their house. It could be a rock, um, a memento from a family member, some sort of family, what do they call them? Like on a shield, right? It can be some sort of family memento. Um, but this is the talking stick. This item will be passed around to help everyone remember that only one person can talk at a time and everyone gets a turn. Who wants to start with the next one, right? And then they can all, each kid take turn reading the different steps. Each of us are going to share one thing we appreciate about a family member. I'm going to start. I'd like to compliment mom for making sure all my laundry was clean, right? Or you can have this instead of be a compliment and appreciation. Oh my gosh, I've seen how hard like dad has been working with this, and I'm so thankful that he's been doing that. I would argue this talks about giving each family member a compliment. I don't think, depending on the size of your family, this might not be like good for the sake of time. You could do an appreciation or a compliment, but just kind of make sure that everybody in the family gets one so that not anyone feels left out. But that might allow you to kind of have better timing for the meeting. If you've got a large family, you might be there for a little while giving compliments. So I usually say you can alter this and do an appreciation for at least one for each person in the family. The agenda will be on the refrigerator. Everyone can write down problems during the week. You'll notice that everyone not being dressed and ready to go when it's time to leave is on the agenda for us to practice problem solving tonight. So, the way that you do this is every week you'll have a sheet of paper on your fridge and it'll have the agenda for next week's family meeting, or something written on it, and you literally anyone who wants to can write, okay, we need to problem solve, somebody's not doing the trash right, or the trash day is getting missed, or I'm recognizing that the family's using too much phone time, or um, you know we're not spending enough family time together, or we have to plan our family vacation, or whatever that looks like is going on the family agenda. Brainstorming means thinking of as many solutions as we can. All ideas are okay, funny, serious, bad, good. We're going to write down every idea for this to solutions to the problem without discussing it first. So let's practice with this problem, right? Everybody not being dressed and ready to go. Who wants to be the scribe and write down stuff? So you'll have somebody who's writing down on that same piece of paper, okay, here's all the solutions. Um, Encourage your kids to go first. Who'd like to start? Who wants to find some wild and crazy idea to do this? Okay. They might say like, okay, what about leaving to school in your pajamas? Those people who aren't ready can walk. Um, the whoever's last has to buy us all dinner the next night, or right, allow for silence. For now, we're just brainstorming. If someone tries to object or discuss the ideas, we just say, for now, we're just brainstorming. All ideas are getting written down. And make sure that you have at least 4 suggestions to the problem. 6 or more is even better. And so then we're going to use the 3 R's and an H to assess each solution. The encouraging solutions must be related, reasonable, respectful, and helpful. And that's how you eliminate things that are not reasonable, right? The person who suggested that we all go to school in our pajamas, probably not reasonable, right? So that one's gonna, okay, who sees solutions we have to eliminate because they're not related, reasonable, respectful, or helpful? Um, Scribe can cross them off and we'll discuss why. And so then we're going to choose the solution. Okay, do we want to narrow it down to one solution that we can all agree to, or do we want to try more than one? We can evaluate how the solution or solutions work during our next meeting in 1 week. We'll talk about that, right? So you can either choose one solution if you guys can do that, right? If that's like, okay, well, we want to go on vacation and everyone thinks we should go to the beach, or everybody thinks we should go to the mountains, or everyone thinks we should go to Disney World, then it's simple. We have one solution, right? However, if you guys can't agree, then we try both and we see how those work. Um, we're going to take turns choosing an activity for the end of each family meeting. For tonight, I've chosen for charades. Who wants to volunteer to decide the fun activity for next week? So these are kind of the 9 steps, right? So we're showing you that you're doing an introduction to the meeting. Obviously, you're not going to do the introduction each time, although you might say, okay, we're going to brainstorm this problem, right? First, we're going to do like some appreciations, and then we're going to go over what the agenda is. And that might look like a problem. It might look like where are we going to go for vacation? What are we going to do for mom's birthday? What are we going to do? Like you might have whatever family problem or thing that you guys need to discuss. That's kind of how you'll jump into the meeting. You don't necessarily have to introduce, but then you're going to do the brainstorming and then you're going to make sure that all the solutions are appropriate, choose one, and then you're going to do a fun activity. And so this is essentially how family meetings will go every week. Eventually, you're going to get so good at them, you won't have to look. It'll be super simple. So, really, what we want you guys, I'm going to give you guys obviously some of the tips, right? The biggest thing about family meetings and the biggest long-term purpose of family meetings, in particularly with positive discipline model, is to teach valuable life skills, right? We're teaching kids how to problem solve and we're brainstorming any problem that we have in the household, right? And we're doing it every week. It's not something that the parents are required. We're not putting all of it on them to say, hey, you have to figure out everything in the household. It's teaching children that they have valuable contribution, right, to the family. They belong, they're significant within the family unit. We can teach them skills like, okay, we're definitely going to sit here and focus on the solutions and not the problem, right? We're not going to sit and make this a really negative discussion. And so we teach them how to problem solve in real time, right? And I think one thing that kids are missing nowadays is certainly problem solving skills. We find that in a variety of ways, in a variety of the research. So we want to teach them those skills by using these family meetings. And positive discipline approach is very heavy on doing this with our kids every week. Um, so you also want to have all your family members sitting somewhere where everyone can kind of see each other and you're not necessarily like eating or doing something else. You want it to be in a comfortable space. Maybe we do ours in the living room. Everyone's kind of sitting around. Usually we do it on the floor because we've got really young kids. Um, and we have an agenda posted on the refrigerator. Right now, ours is literally just a post-it note. And my kids will either my 5-year-old will write something, my husband might jot something down. Um, and I imagine that as your kids age, right, this is going to look a little bit different. But one of the healthiest tips for family meetings is that we don't use this, right, as punitive. We don't start with negativity in any way, and we don't focus on that. And really, one of the ways that we help do that with that warmth, love, connection getting through is we always focus on compliments or appreciations first, because we're kind of setting the tone, right? We're setting the tone by verbalizing the positive things about each other and we're reminding everybody what the function of a family meeting is. It's not punitive, it's not negative, it's not this crisis thing where we go and just like slam each other. We're definitely going to set the tone by appreciating each member in some way, shape, or form. We only use family meetings to focus on solutions, not blame. So if we say something about everyone's late in the morning or we're finding that we're late every morning to school, we do not want to go into focusing on who's to blame and oh, well, it's because she does this or right, like, oh, it's because like she's crying, she's just crying and spending all of her time doing this. I mean, sometimes that's how it goes for my kids because my 5-year-old tends to blame the 2.5-year-old because she is not really in control of her faculties right now. but it's not for that. So we really want to redirect that and say, like, we're only focusing on solutions. Let's, find an appreciation for your sister, and then we're going to move on to solutions. Um, this is a really good way to teach kids about brainstorming. And if your kids are not good at brainstorming, you're really going to focus on teaching them in the first session. Brainstorming means that we think of all possible solutions. It's okay for things to be crazy, wild, funny, silly. All ideas are okay, right? They might seem like they make no sense, but we're going to write down everything, right? Because brainstorming, we're getting them in this idea that it's practical, it's respectful to have everyone have input, right? And so we're writing it all down and we don't have to discuss each one, but we're definitely going to choose one eventually that we can all agree with. We just want to make sure that everyone is included. Sometimes it's fun to have silly, outrageous, nonsense options. And it's for the sake of obviously being with your family, engaging in this process. Now, obviously, you're going to come up with a solution, but like having fun in that process, having fun coming up with solutions to a real problem is a great skill, right? So you're going to choose one suggestion. Obviously, it's practical and respectful to everybody. You're going to try it for a week. You can let each person choose which one they want to use, right? If several suggestions might work. When a consensus can't be reached and it's practical to only use one suggestion, you're going to table that item for more discussion the following week. Arguably, that's pretty rare. I think that happens. Um, Especially when you're using those three R's and an H to determine whether that each one of those solutions is appropriate. So one of the ideas or one of the best tips too is to calendar in a family fun activity for later in the week, right? You might put all the other like sports, other activities, the schedule of who needs rides where and when. But then you're going to put somewhere in there, okay, family night, family movie night on Fridays, or family beach day on Saturday, or family park day on Sunday, or whatever it is that you guys want to do. Um, I talk about keeping family meetings 30 minutes or less, especially depending on the ages of your kids. But in the beginning, they might feel like they're a little longer because you're kind of like catching up on doing this process, right? You're learning, you're doing the appreciations, you're kind of working through any bugs of the process. But essentially, they should be pretty short. 15 to 30 minutes is generally enough, particularly because, you might be working through, okay, what's the biggest problem and how are we going to solve that one? Right? And you might do one of those a week. Arguably, most families aren't having tons of stuff to do during these meetings. They have one issue, right? And maybe it's not even an issue. Maybe they have one thing they need to plan or one thing they need to problem solve. But they can generally be pretty short. Again, you're going to end with some sort of fun activity, some sort of game. Maybe you do dessert, right? And this can be like after dinner if you're scheduling it after dinner. Maybe you're doing some sort of dessert at the end. Um, Mistakes are wonderful, wonderful opportunities to learn. All right, so what we talked about initially is family meetings are not a platform for lectures, parental control, crisis management, negative things, punitive. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to implement family meetings. Don't expect perfection. Improve a little bit each week. Um, Learning skills takes time. So even solutions that don't work, you're still giving an opportunity to learn and try again. And what we're really doing is learning cooperation, collaboration, problem solving skills. These are the things that we're giving to our kids from family meetings. That's the biggest goal of all of this, right? Yeah, so this talks about developmental readiness. We do family meetings with my youngest because she's literally just, maybe she's bopping around while we're doing it. Ours are usually pretty short. She might color or play with blocks or something while we're doing it, because she's not, hyperverbal and paying attention at this point. But we include her. This says that if it's too distracting, you can wait till they're asleep. You can give them some sort of quiet activity like drawing, puzzles, water wow, whatever it is. Avoid skipping them. Make them one of the most important, or if not the most important date on your calendar. And that's really just to prioritize your family, prioritize giving your kids these skills, teaching them about collaboration. And family meetings can be really beneficial if you use them regularly. I think structured habits like this within the family are really, really helpful. And yeah, I think I'm excited to get to teach you guys about them because family meetings for us have really been drastic. Our kids are kind of so used to it that it's kind of fun to just watch them problem solve sometimes by themselves, right? Especially my 5-year-old. And I think as they get older, it's definitely exciting to watch them do. All right. All right, so the last slide of information that I have for you guys this evening is some scientific support for positive discipline. This kind of wraps up the part two of positive discipline, and I really wanted you guys to be able to access information that basically shows that the use of this model decreases authoritarian and permissive styles, and it drastically is shown to reduce parental stress. So while I understand that maybe who knows if this feels like a lot of information or if you guys want more, sometimes when I try to put positive discipline into the first one and two parts, it can be really difficult because it is typically taught in like 10-week classes where parents come and they're doing this 10 weeks in a row for every week. And so I'm trying to shove a lot of information in just 2 weeks. Um, but I think that it's great because San Marcos is offering these classes and we can really get a lot of information out to you guys. I just hope it doesn't feel like a water hose where I'm just like telling you guys so much. But positive discipline has been really helpful both professionally, personally for me. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Here's a bunch of resources for you. It's in the PDF that you have. These are clickable links, or that you can we can send those out, or I can copy and paste them into the chat. If you guys have questions about any of this, the Virtual Parent Academy, I've put our contact information up on the screen. And that's all the information I have. If anyone has questions or comments, Ani has put the survey. There's an anonymous survey if you guys would like to give us some feedback.